My family always compared me to my perfect cousin until I spoke up, and everything they believed about him came crashing down. I'm a 30-year-old guy working as a freelance graphic designer, and let me tell you, Thanksgiving this year was a complete disaster. Every year my family gets together, and without fail, my cousin Kevin's name comes up. You'd think the guy walks on water with the way they talk about him. Kevin is a corporate lawyer, the golden boy of the family. He's tall, always well-dressed, drives a fancy car, and pretty much fits every stereotype of success that my family holds dear. Meanwhile, I'm just the guy with the art projects. This year, it started even before Kevin arrived. We were sitting around the dinner table, and as soon as the food hit the plates, my mom dropped the first comment. She didn't waste any time. "Kevin really has his life together, doesn't he?" she said, looking at me as if I was supposed to nod along and agree. I just kept my head down, focusing on the mashed potatoes. My freelance business has been doing pretty well recently, but none of them care about that. All they see is that I'm not making six figures in some high-powered job, and that's all that matters to them. The night went on, and the conversation kept circling back to Kevin. My aunts and uncles couldn't stop talking about him. "Did you hear Kevin's firm is grooming him for partnership? Oh, and he just got back from a vacation in the Maldives." It's like they're obsessed with him. I've learned to keep quiet over the years. There's no point in trying to steer the conversation when all roads lead back to my cousin. But this year, it felt different. I don't know why, but something inside me just couldn't take it anymore. As if on cue, Kevin made his grand entrance. He showed up late, of course, and the moment he walked through the door, all eyes were on him. He strolled in, flashing the keys to his new sports car like he was the star of a reality show. Everyone rushed over to greet him. I stayed seated, watching from the sidelines as they practically fawned over him. No one even bothered asking me about my life or my work. I'd recently landed a pretty cool freelance project with a popular indie brand, but it was like I didn't exist. Then came the kicker. During dinner, my mom leaned over and said, "Maybe if you had stuck to a more stable career, you could afford a place like Kevin's." I could feel my hands clenching into fists under the table. I didn't say anything, but inside, I was boiling. It wasn't just the comment. It was years of hearing this same narrative. I know what they think. Kevin's the success story, and I'm the guy who could have done more. But here's the thing. Kevin's life isn't perfect. He's miserable in his high-stress job, and I know he's had more failed relationships than I can count. He's confided in me before about how lonely he is, but none of that matters to the family. They only see the surface and think he's got it all. Knowing that doesn't help, though, even if I understand his struggles. I can't shake the feeling that I'm always living in his shadow. Then my uncle chimed in. He leaned over, half joking. "You know, Kevin could probably get you a job at his firm. Maybe it's time to get serious about work, huh?" I forced a laugh, but inside, I felt like I was about to explode. It's like they don't even see me. I've built a career that I'm proud of, but in their eyes, it's not real work. They just can't respect it. After dinner, I found myself drinking more than I usually would. Everyone moved into the living room, and, of course, the conversation revolved around Kevin again. They talked about his recent promotion, his new car, and the vacation he just took. I tried to join in at one point, casually mentioning the freelance project I'd been working on, but before I could even finish, my aunt interrupted me to talk about how Kevin's firm is sending him to Europe for a big case. I felt invisible. That's when the memories started flooding back. Growing up, it was always the same story. Kevin was the kid everyone compared me to, at school events, family vacations, even birthday parties. It was always, "Look at Kevin, isn't he amazing?" Meanwhile, I was just there, the other cousin. I don't know what came over me, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. The room got quiet when I finally spoke up. I said something like, "You guys do realize I have my own life, right? It might not be a high-paying corporate job, but it makes me happy." The room fell into an awkward silence. My mom gave me that look, the one that says she's disappointed without even saying a word. No one knew how to respond. Of course, Kevin, being the golden child, tried to smooth things over. He flashed that polished smile and said something nice about my creative work, but it didn't feel genuine. It felt patronizing. That's when I snapped. I shot back, "Thanks, but I don't need validation from someone who doesn't even know what happiness is." You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was stunned. No one had ever spoken to Kevin like that, especially not me. My dad quickly pulled me aside, whispering that I was making a scene, but I didn't care anymore. I was done pretending everything was fine. Without saying another word, I grabbed my coat and walked out. I couldn't stand being in that house any longer. I was fed up with the constant comparisons, the feeling of never being good enough. As soon as I got home, I opened Reddit and vented. I posted everything, how I've been compared to Kevin my whole life, how Thanksgiving was the final straw, how I was sick of being treated like I didn't matter. The post blew up. Thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments. People from all over shared their own stories of family comparisons. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel so alone. Late that night, I got a text from Kevin. Saw your post. We need to talk. The morning after Thanksgiving, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. At first, I didn't even check it. I knew what it was. After my Reddit post blew up, I figured some family members would see it, and sure enough, they did. It was a mix. Some messages were supportive, but others were full of outrage. My aunt left a long voicemail, furious that I aired private family matters in public. Another cousin, who I hadn't talked to in years, sent me a message saying, "I get it, I've been there." That one surprised me. Then there was the one message I had been dreading, my mom. Her call came around 10 in the morning, and I could already imagine what the conversation was going to be like. I let it ring for a while, but eventually I picked up. She didn't hold back. She was upset that I'd put our family business online, demanding I apologize to Kevin for embarrassing him in front of everyone. It was all the usual stuff, like how I had to make things right and fix what I'd done. But this time was different. I didn't cave. I told her I wasn't going to apologize, not after years of quietly dealing with the constant comparisons. I made it clear that I was done pretending everything was fine, and if they couldn't accept me for who I was, I'd have to step back. She was quiet for a moment, probably not expecting me to stand my ground like that, but eventually the call ended with her saying she was disappointed in me. It stung, but I knew this had to happen. Later that night, I got a call from Kevin. I wasn't sure what to expect. Maybe another lecture, maybe some passive-aggressive attempt at smoothing things over. But Kevin just wanted to talk. I almost didn't pick up. There was a part of me that wanted to just ignore him, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered, and after a short, awkward exchange, we agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop in town. When I arrived, Kevin was already there, sitting at a table by the window, looking a little less put together than usual. He wasn't wearing his usual sharp suit, just a hoodie and jeans, which was weird to see on him. I sat down, and after a few minutes of small talk, he got to the point. He apologized. He said he didn't realize how much the family's constant comparisons had affected me. I nodded, but I didn't fully buy it. I knew he had to be aware on some level. He had always been the golden child, and I figured he enjoyed that role, even if he didn't admit it out loud. But then he told me something that caught me off guard. He said he hated his job, the long hours, the constant pressure, and the way his parents cared more about his success than his happiness. It was eating him up. He even said he'd been thinking about quitting for a while but had no idea how to break it to the family. He told me that all the praise, all the attention he got, it wasn't making him happy. In fact, it made him feel even more trapped. I just sat there, kind of stunned. For the first time, it felt like we were on the same page. I always thought he loved the attention, but hearing him talk, I realized he had his own frustrations, just like I did. We started talking more honestly than we ever had before, about how much pressure we both felt from the family. I told him about how being compared to him my whole life made me feel invisible, like nothing I did would ever measure up. And surprisingly, he told me he envied me. He said he wished he had the courage to pursue something he actually cared about, like I did with my design work, but felt too trapped by the expectations placed on him. Then he dropped the bombshell. He was planning to quit his job and travel for a year to figure out what he really wanted in life. I didn't know what to say. This was Kevin we were talking about, the guy who had everything, and here he was telling me he was about to throw it all away to go backpacking or something. Part of me was shocked, but another part of me respected him for it. It took guts to walk away from a career like his, especially when the entire family had been cheering him on for years. When he finally told the family about his plan, it went about as well as you'd expect. The same relatives who had been singing his praises just days before were suddenly full of criticism. How could you throw away such a promising career? What about your future? It was surreal to watch. All the admiration they had for him was crumbling in front of my eyes. I couldn't help but find a bit of satisfaction in it. For once, Kevin wasn't being treated like the perfect one. He was just like the rest of us, flawed and trying to figure things out. As Kevin started planning his trip, I found myself respecting him in a way I never thought I would. He was taking control of his life, doing what he wanted, not what was expected of him. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was living in his shadow. The family had finally stopped treating him like he was untouchable, and it felt like a victory, not just for me, but for both of us. A few days later, my parents called a family meeting to discuss Kevin's decision and, of course, my recent rebellion. I went, But this time, I wasn't going to sit quietly. I told them straight up that if they didn't stop comparing me to others, I was ready to cut contact. I wasn't going to let them keep making me feel like I wasn't enough. There was a lot of tension in the room after that, but I didn't care. I'd finally said what I needed to say. As I left the meeting, I felt a strange sense of peace. I didn't know what was going to happen next with my family, but for the first time, it didn't matter. I was finally living my life on my terms, and it felt damn good. 2 weeks passed after the family meeting, and I hadn't spoken to my parents since. Honestly, the silence felt like a strange mix of relief and discomfort. On one hand, I was emotionally drained from the whole ordeal, but on the other hand, I finally felt some peace knowing I had stood my ground. The last thing I said to them was clear. If they didn't stop comparing me to Kevin, I was ready to cut contact. It had left them stunned, and that silence, yeah, that was them trying to figure out how to respond. In the middle of all that quiet, my phone buzzed. It was my younger sister. She usually stayed out of the family drama, but this time she called to say she admired how I handled things at the meeting. She told me she had been feeling the pressure of family expectations too, but never felt brave enough to speak up. Hearing that was a bit of a surprise, but it made sense. She's always been in the background, never causing waves, so I guess I never considered that she might feel some of the same weight I did. Meanwhile, Kevin was already making moves. I got a message from him saying he had sold his sports car and was downsizing his apartment, all in preparation for his big travel plans. The guy wasn't wasting any time. I couldn't help but be shocked at how fast he was moving, but I had to respect it. He was actually taking control of his life, doing what made him happy, and that was something I hadn't expected from him. It was strange seeing him shift from the perfect corporate guy into someone who was actively choosing to walk away from all that. But the biggest surprise came a few days later. I was sitting at home scrolling through Reddit when my phone buzzed again. It was my dad. Now, my dad isn't one for long conversations or emotional speeches, so when I saw his name pop up, I wasn't expecting much. But when I opened the message, I was stunned. It was brief, just a few words. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." That's it. It wasn't a long message, but coming from him, it meant a lot. For as long as I could remember, my dad had always been the silent type, never really showing much emotion, so getting this text from him felt, well, huge. Of course, not everyone was on board with how things had gone down. One of my aunts called me, clearly trying to guilt-trip me into apologizing to my mom. She went on about how family comes first and how heartbroken my mom was. But this time, I wasn't backing down. I held firm, telling her that things had to change, and I wasn't going to keep living under the same weight of expectations. I wasn't rude about it, but I was direct. It felt like another small victory in a way, finally being able to set boundaries with them, even if they didn't like it. I kept up updating Reddit throughout all of this, and the support I got from strangers was overwhelming. Every time I posted an update, the comments would flood in from people who had been through similar situations. It was almost like therapy. Seeing that other people understood what I was going through made me feel like I wasn't so alone in all of this. It gave me the validation I hadn't been getting from my own family for years. Then one night, during one of our catch-up calls, Kevin hit me with something I wasn't expecting. He floated the idea of me joining him on his travels, at least for a few months. He figured it would be a great opportunity for both of us to get away from the family pressure and just reset. I didn't know how to respond at first. The idea of taking off for a few months was tempting, but I had never been the type to take spontaneous trips, especially not with someone I had such a complicated history with. Still, it lingered in the back of my mind. A few days later, the silence from my parents finally broke. My mom called, and it wasn't the angry, demanding call I had expected. Instead, she was crying, begging me to come over and talk. She didn't understand why I was so upset, why I'd been so angry, and she pleaded with me to mend things before they got worse. I agreed to meet her, but this time, I set the terms. I told her I would come over, but we were going to have a real conversation, an honest one, about how her constant comparisons to Kevin had affected me for years. She hesitated, but agreed. When I got to the house, things were tense. My mom was defensive at first, not understanding why I was making such a big deal out of everything. But as I started to lay it all out, how the Thanksgiving dinner went, how she always talked about Kevin's success without ever acknowledging my own, it started to sink in. I gave her specific examples, showing her how the family's obsession with Kevin had made me feel like an afterthought for years. At first, she was in denial. She kept saying that she only wanted the best for me, that she never meant to hurt me. But as the conversation went on, I saw a change in her. She started to realize how her actions, even if well-intentioned, had done some serious damage. She apologized, and though I accepted it, I knew this wasn't something that would heal overnight. My dad was there too, sitting quietly as usual. He didn't say much, but at one point, when I was explaining how suffocating their expectations had been, he nodded. That small gesture meant a lot more than any words could have. It was his way of acknowledging that he understood. The meeting ended on a cautiously positive note. My mom said she was willing to work on things, and my dad even offered to come to one of my freelance art shows, something he'd never done before. I left feeling optimistic, but I knew it was going to take time for things to truly change. Later that night, I found myself thinking about Kevin's offer to travel. Maybe this was the perfect time to step back from all the family drama and focus on myself. I had spent years dealing with their expectations, and now I finally had a chance to break free, at least for a little while. I decided to go. I texted Kevin and told him I'd join him for the first leg of his travels. I didn't know what to expect, but I figured it was time to find out. Departure day came fast. Kevin and I boarded the plane for Japan, our first stop. I hadn't traveled much before, so the whole experience felt surreal. The excitement hit me in waves, mixed with a little bit of anxiety. There we were, two cousins who had spent most of our lives tangled up in family drama, about to embark on this massive trip together. Before we left, we agreed on one thing: no family talk. This was our chance to leave all of that behind and just enjoy the experience. The first few days in Japan were a blur of new sights, sounds, and food. We dove straight into sightseeing: temples, bustling markets, neon-lit streets at night. Kevin, for the first time in ages, seemed relaxed. He wasn't checking his phone every 2 seconds or talking about work. I started seeing a different side of him, one that wasn't tied to his career or the family's expectations. I wasn't sure what to make of it at first, but it was definitely a shift from the Kevin I'd known. One night, after a long day of exploring, we found ourselves at a quiet dinner spot. Over bowls of ramen, Kevin finally opened up about his decision to quit his job. It wasn't just the stress, he explained. It was the realization that he had been living a life dictated by what everyone else wanted for him: his parents, his bosses, even our extended family. Everything he had done up to this point was for their approval, and now he didn't know what he actually wanted for himself. It hit me harder than I expected, mostly because I realized that we were more alike than I thought. Sure, our paths had been different, but we both felt trapped by expectations, his in being the perfect success story, and mine in being constantly compared to that success. The more we talked, the more the walls between us came down. For the first time, we were having a real conversation, not the surface-level chats we'd had at family gatherings. Kevin admitted that he had always envied my freedom to pursue what I loved. He told me that while I may not have had the money or prestige, I had something he didn't: passion. In return, I confessed that I'd felt inadequate next to him my entire life. It was a raw, honest conversation that brought us closer than we had ever been before. Of course, things weren't perfect. A few days later, our first big argument happened. Kevin, being Kevin, wanted to plan out every detail of our trip. He had itineraries, backup plans, even spreadsheets of places we could visit. Meanwhile, I was looking to be more spontaneous, to just go with the flow and explore without a rigid schedule. The clash was inevitable. We ended up not talking for the rest of the day, both of us too stubborn to back down. By the next morning, we were both over it. We sat down and apologized. Kevin admitted that his need to control every detail came from his high-stress job, where everything had to be perfect. And I realized that my frustration wasn't really about the trip. It was deeper than that. It was about me still feeling like I had to prove something. We agreed to meet each other halfway. From that point on, we found a balance. Some days we followed Kevin's plans, and other days we let the day unfold as it wanted. Once we found our rhythm, the trip became exactly what I needed. We hiked through mountains, explored quiet temples, and even took a spontaneous weekend trip to the countryside. The more time we spent traveling, the lighter I felt. It was like shedding layers of expectation with every new experience. I started to rediscover my joy, not just in life, but in my work. I even pulled out my sketchbook for the first time in months, drawing scenes from the trip, things that inspired me. Throughout all of this, my phone buzzed with messages from home. My mom, mostly. She would send updates about how things were going, but I kept my responses short. I wasn't ready to dive back into that world just yet. Then, one day, I got a message from my dad. "Hope you're finding what you're looking for." It read short, simple, but it carried a lot of weight coming from him. I didn't respond right away, but the message stayed with me. As Kevin and I continued our trip, he started thinking about what he would do when it was all over. He wasn't planning on going back to corporate law but didn't know what the next step should be. One night, I suggested he try consulting or maybe teaching law part-time. For the first time, he seemed open to the idea. It was a weird shift. Kevin, who had always been so sure of his path, was now considering something completely different, but it felt like a good change. One night, while scrolling through Reddit, I decided to post a reflection about how the trip had changed my perspective. I wrote about letting go of the need for family approval, and how my relationship with Kevin had shifted from rivalry to mutual respect. It felt good to share, and the comments flooded in again, full of support and understanding. A few hours later, my mom sent me a text. She had read the post and said she was proud of me for following my passions. It was unexpected, but for the first time, I felt cautiously hopeful about mending things with her. By the end of the trip, I felt more in control of my life than I ever had before. I wasn't defined by family comparisons anymore, and for the first time, I felt truly confident in who I was. Kevin and I parted ways at the airport. He was off to his next destination, while I headed home. We both had a deeper understanding of each other now, something I never thought would happen. As I settled back into life at home, I couldn't help but feel like this was the start of something new. My freelance business was picking up again, and I had some big ideas brewing. And maybe, just maybe, there was something else on the horizon, but more on that next time. Coming back home after my trip with Kevin felt different in a way I couldn't really explain at first. Everything about my apartment seemed smaller, almost like it wasn't enough to hold the new perspective I'd gained during our travels. But instead of feeling cramped or stuck, I felt more in control, like I finally had space to breathe. I had clarity, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't bogged down by the weight of family comparisons or self-doubt. I was ready to dive back into life full throttle. The first thing I did when I got back was reconnect with my freelance work. I hadn't realized just how much stepping away would recharge my creativity. Within days, new ideas were flowing, and I was more inspired than I had been in months. I started collaborating with a few new clients, including a high-profile brand that I'd been eager to work with for a while. After locking in that deal, I posted an update on our Freelance about the growth of my business. The support was overwhelming. It wasn't just the upvotes or comments. It was the recognition from people who understood the hustle, who'd seen me vent and now saw me thriving. As I settled back into my routine, my family started reaching out more often. My mom called and invited me over for dinner, and I noticed my dad was sending the occasional text, asking how work was going. It felt like they were trying, and while I appreciated the effort, I kept my guard up. I wasn't about to let myself get sucked back into those toxic comparisons that had ruled my life for so long. Eventually, I took my mom up on her dinner invitation. I was a little apprehensive, expecting the same old routine of hearing all about Kevin's latest successes, but to my surprise, things were different. She actually seemed interested in my trip with Kevin, asking about the places we visited and what the experience was like. For once, the conversation wasn't centered on Kevin's achievements or how I stacked up against him. It was almost normal. During dinner, my dad chimed in with something that completely caught me off guard. He said he was proud of me for making the decision to travel and focus on my passion. It was a simple comment, but coming from him, it felt huge. My dad has never been one for long, emotional talks, so to hear him acknowledge my choices like that was a bigger deal than he probably realized. It was the kind of support I hadn't expected, but it gave me even more confidence that I was on the right path. As the weeks went by, I noticed a shift in how my family interacted with me. My mom still slipped in the occasional remark about Kevin, but she was quick to catch herself and change the subject. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And more importantly, I wasn't letting it get to me like it used to. I finally felt like I had control over how much their opinions influenced me. Then, something unexpected happened. A few weeks after returning home, I ran into Stella at a local art show. We had known each other from college, but I hadn't seen her in years. She was a photographer now, and we clicked instantly, bonding over our shared love for creative work. We exchanged numbers, and before I knew it, we were grabbing coffee later that week. It wasn't long before I felt something I hadn't in a while, a genuine spark. Around the same time, Kevin called me from Italy. He sounded happier than I'd ever heard him. He talked about his travels and the incredible experiences he'd been having. He even mentioned that he was thinking about not returning to law at all. Instead, he was considering a passion project he'd always wanted to pursue, writing a travel memoir. Hearing him talk about his future with excitement, rather than stress, was a refreshing change, and I found myself genuinely rooting for him. There was no tension between us anymore, no competition. We were just two people, each figuring out our own path. Things with Stella took off quickly after that first coffee date. She was supportive, encouraging, and genuinely interested in my work. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was with someone who appreciated me for who I was, without comparing me to anyone else. It was refreshing, and the relationship started to develop naturally. We spent more time together, and the more I got to know her, the more I realized how much of an impact she was having on my creativity. When I mentioned Stella to my mom, she immediately asked, "What does she do for a living?" Normally, that question would have triggered a sense of needing to justify or explain, but this time, I didn't feel that pressure. I simply told her that Stella was a photographer and that I was happy with her. My mom must have sensed that pushing further wasn't going to go well, because she let the topic drop, something that definitely wouldn't have happened before. A few weeks later, another big opportunity landed in my lap. I was hired by a tech company to lead a design team on a major rebranding project. It was the kind of job I never thought I'd be trusted with before, and it felt like all my hard work was finally paying off. I shared the news on our Entrepreneur, and the response was incredible. I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come since that first venting post. Speaking of reflection, I wrote another post on Reddit, summarizing the last few months and how everything had changed. My relationship with my family, my bond with Kevin, my newfound confidence. It all felt like part of a journey I was finally proud of. The post went viral, with thousands of comments and upvotes from people who had been following along since the beginning. It was humbling but also validating to see how many people resonated with my story. Stella had a major influence on my creativity too. Her photography inspired me to explore new styles in my design work, and we started collaborating on small projects together. I felt like my work had taken on new depth and meaning since we started dating, and I couldn't wait to see where our collaboration would take us. Now, I'm focused on the future. I'm planning to expand my freelance business, explore new creative avenues with Stella, and continue maintaining healthy boundaries with my family. I'm not fully healed from the years of comparison, but I'm on a path that feels right for me. There are big changes ahead, I can feel it, and I'm ready for whatever comes next. Months have passed since my trip with Kevin, and life has taken on a pace I never thought possible. My freelance business is booming. That tech company I landed as a client, they were so impressed with the work I did on their rebranding that they extended my contract, and I'm now managing multiple large-scale projects for them. It's crazy how much things have changed. I've never been this busy, but it's the kind of busy I love. I'm finally working on my own terms, doing what I'm passionate about, and getting paid well for it. It feels surreal to be in this position after all those years of uncertainty. Family life has improved too. My mom doesn't bring up Kevin in conversations anymore, at least not in the way she used to. The constant comparisons have faded, and we've reached a place where our relationship feels more genuine. There's still some awkwardness when we talk about career stuff, but it's not like before. My dad, in his quiet way, continues to show his support, and that's made a world of difference. It's funny how those small gestures can mean so much. It's not like the past is erased, but things are peaceful now, and I've found a sense of calm around them that I never had before. Things with Stella have moved forward too. We're officially a couple now, and she's become a huge part of my life. We've even started talking about moving in together. It's something I never expected to happen so soon, but with Stella, it just feels right. She's been incredibly supportive, and for the first time, I feel like I'm with someone who sees me for who I am, not compared to anyone else. It's refreshing and, honestly, kind of amazing. Kevin, meanwhile, has been finishing up his year-long trip. He called me recently from South America, where he's been exploring for the past few months. He sounded more grounded than I'd ever heard him. He told me he's decided to write a book about his travels, blending his experiences with reflections on the pressure of living up to family expectations. I could hear the excitement in his voice, and I couldn't help but feel proud of him. Kevin's always been the golden child, but now he's carving out a path for himself that aligns with who he really is. It's a huge change from the person he was a year ago, and I'm genuinely excited to see what he does next. Kevin also dropped a bombshell. He won't be returning to corporate law, at least not in the way we all expected. Instead, he's planning to become a legal consultant for nonprofits and socially conscious startups. It's a complete pivot, but it aligns more with his values. When he told me this, I was amazed at how far we've both come in such a short amount of time. Neither of us is where we thought we'd be, but we're both happier for it. I've been thinking a lot about the role Reddit has played in my journey. Sharing my story with the community has been a big part of my growth. The support from strangers, the validation from people who've experienced the same family pressure. It all helped me realize that my feelings were valid. I wasn't alone. I wrote a post recently, thanking the community for the encouragement, and the response was overwhelming. It made me realize just how far I've come since that first Thanksgiving post. Not long ago, we had another family gathering, this time for my dad's birthday. It was the first one in a while where the energy felt different. The usual tension I'd always braced for wasn't there. Instead of the constant comparisons, my family asked about my work because they were genuinely interested, not because they were trying to see how I stacked up against Kevin. Kevin was still abroad, but even in his absence, the dynamic had shifted. At one point, my aunt made an offhand comment about how Kevin must be making so much money with his new venture, but this time, I calmly responded, "I think we're all doing well in our own ways. No anger, no frustration, just a simple fact." My aunt looked a little flustered but let it go, and the conversation moved on. It felt like a quiet victory. When Kevin finally returned from his travels, the family threw him a welcome home party, but this time, it wasn't about putting him on a pedestal. The focus wasn't solely on his achievements or how he'd spent the last year. The energy was balanced. It was the first time I felt like the family saw us as equals, no more pressure to live up to someone else's standards. It was a weird but liberating feeling. During the party, Kevin made a short speech about his travels and what he'd learned. He thanked everyone for their support, but what surprised me was when he specifically thanked me. He said I had encouraged him to break free from the expectations that had been holding him back. I wasn't expecting that. It was a strange, humbling moment, hearing my cousin, someone I'd spent years resenting, acknowledge the impact I'd had on his life. After the party, Kevin and I talked about collaborating on a project. He floated the idea of combining his travel stories with my design skills to create a website or platform where we could share his writing alongside my art. It's still just an idea for now, but it's something we're both excited about. It's amazing to think that, after all these years of tension, we might actually be working together. Looking back, I can't believe how much has changed. My family, once obsessed with comparing me to Kevin, now sees me in a new light. They've finally stopped trying to fit me into a mold, and I feel like I'm accepted as my own person. As for the future, I'm focused on expanding my freelance business. I've got big plans, including hiring a small team to help with the growing workload. Stella and I are also discussing the possibility of starting our own creative studio together, which has been a dream for both of us. It feels like everything is lining up in ways I never imagined. Kevin finished his book recently, and I was one of the first to read it. It's raw, honest, and deeply personal, a reflection on the pressure of family expectations and the journey to finding one's true self. It resonated with me in a way that I hadn't expected, and I'm proud to have played a part in his transformation. As I close this chapter, I can't help but feel grateful for the journey I've been on. I've learned to live life on my own terms, without constantly seeking family approval. I've built a thriving career, found love with Stella, and redefined my relationships with both my family and Kevin. There may be more exciting updates to come, but for now, I'm happy, at peace, and ready for whatever comes next.